Hey, welcome! Today we're going to dive into two words you probably think you know inside and out: humility and silence. But what if our whole modern take on them is, well, just a performance? We're going to dig into a classic spiritual text that makes a pretty bold claim that true humility is something you can't even know you have, and true silence has almost nothing to do with just being quiet. This is going to be interesting. Let's get into it.
So let's start right there. I want you to actually think about it for a second. When you hear that word humility, what's the first image that pops into your head? Is it a certain person, a kind of action? Whatever it is, get that picture clear in your mind, because we're about to put it to the test. For a lot of us, I'm guessing it's probably images like these, right? Someone kind of standing in the back, maybe speaking in a soft voice, or always putting themselves down. These are all things we can see. They're actions that can be performed. But the text we're looking at asks a really critical question. Is this the real deal, or is it just good acting?
And that question right there is the heart of the whole thing. The text basically says there are two kinds of humility. There's false humility, which is all about the performance for an audience, and then there's true humility, which is a state of being you're not even conscious of. So let's really unpack the difference between them. Okay, and this really lays it all out. On one hand, you have false humility. It's totally driven by ego. It's a show you put on to get praise for being humble. It's secretly a kind of pride that's terrified of people seeing your actual flaws. But then you have true humility, and this is a whole different world. It isn't even aware of itself. It's the state of being so genuinely indifferent to your own self-image that you can take criticism, you can face your own mistakes, without that panicked need to defend yourself. It's not a performance, it's a real letting go. And this quote just nails the central paradox, doesn't it? The very second you start patting yourself on the back thinking, wow, I'm getting really humble, poof, it's gone. According to this text, true humility just can't exist in the same room as self-awareness or self-congratulation. So, you see, the real fight isn't with what other people say about us. That's not the enemy. The true enemy is inside. It's that voice, that deep-seated pride that just craves validation, that has to be right, that's absolutely terrified of being exposed. That's what the text calls our old self. Now, this whole idea of an internal battle leads us right into the second big concept today: silence. Because, you guessed it, just like with humility, the argument is that there's a surface-level, external kind of silence, and then there's the real thing, which is so much deeper. We all get outer silence, right? It's just not talking. It's a physical state. But inner silence is something else entirely. It's about quieting all that chatter inside your head. It's a state of focus so intense that you actually forget where you are, because you're concentrating all your purpose, all your will, on one single thing. It's not empty. It's a state of profound inner rest. And what you find in that inner silence isn't nothingness. The text describes it as this feeling of incredible, sweet rest and safety. It's like finding a totally secure harbor, not just from the noise of the world, but even more importantly, from the constant noise inside our own minds. So we've got these two huge ideas on the table: true humility and inner silence. But here's where it all clicks together. They're not two separate goals you work on. They're actually two sides of the very same coin. One leads to the other, on a path to what this text calls inner rest. And here it is. This is the central thesis. The text argues you literally cannot have one without the other. True humility, that genuine act of letting go of the self, is the very thing that creates the space for inner silence. And it's only inside that quieted heart that true humility can actually exist. So how do you get there? Well, the text actually lays out a kind of process for emptying the self. First, you separate from distractions, both outside and inside. Then comes the really hard part. You let go of yourself. You release that deep need to be approved of. And that right there is true humility in action. This act of letting go creates an empty space, an inner silence. And it's only then, in that quieted space, that you can be filled with something greater, what the text calls light and love. And believe it or not, this whole four-step process can be boiled down to one incredibly powerful idea: seek only one thing. The text argues that if you focus all of your energy, all of your desire on one ultimate purpose, what it calls the creator, then all the other little things we chase, all the distractions that create that inner noise, they just fall away. You stop chasing the many and find your rest in the one. So let's bring this all home with a final thought. I mean, these are profound, ancient ideas, but what on earth do they mean for us, living right now in our incredibly noisy, self-obsessed world? The author asks this almost heartbreaking question, wondering why we so often choose to chase after temporary things, praise, stuff, success, when there's this deeper, more lasting inner peace available. And you gotta admit, that question feels like it could have been written this morning, not centuries ago. And that's really the question I want to leave you with. Our entire culture, it seems, is built on self-promotion, on building your personal brand, on being seen, on being loud. In a world like that, these ideas of a humility you don't even notice and a silence that's about your inner world, they feel revolutionary, maybe even impossible. So the real challenge for us to chew on is, how do we possibly find this hidden, quiet, inner rest in a world that never, ever stops telling us to be louder?
For more spiritual resources, visit lokaken.ai.